least expected. These mechanical beasts bite down and never let go. A death sentence for rodents.
He's not going anywhere.
A beacon of hope for fish. A tool for cleaning up New Orleans. Or a human intruder's worst nightmare.
Don't touch anything and you won't be harmed.
Simple in concept, yet advanced in their engineering. They pushed the American frontier to the west and created a division in its people. You'd better watch your step. Now, Traps on Modern Marvels. We now return to Traps on Modern Marvels. Randolph County, West Virginia. It's part of the 920,000 acres of Monongahela National Forest. It's home to nearly 4,000 American black bears. And every year, experts from the West Virginia Division of Natural Resources Black Bear Management Program are out to trap them as part of an ongoing statewide population study. The beastly challenge of trapping an animal that can weigh up to 400 pounds is handled with snares, a type of modified lasso. They must be powerful enough to capture and restrain the bears, yet incorporate a humane design that won't injure them. The first step in building the snare is to pick a tree.
When we're looking for the snare spot, we're looking for just that perfect tree. Not one that's too big that we can't get the cable around, not one too small that he's going to break it off the next morning. We're looking for a nice medium-sized tree, like this maple right here.
Chris Ryan will use the tree as an anchor for the snare. He chains a wire loop to the trunk.
This is a spring we put on the snares just for safety, just like on a porch swing, so that it's not just hooked to the tree real solid, so that the actual snare will give. And then you come out to the end of it. This is just what we call the angle iron. And what we'll do is we'll point the actual cable on the outside. You can see when the bear would be caught, the cable's pointing out, so it's not cutting into the paw.
The flat, even ground at the tree's base is perfect for securing the trap's key mechanical component, the throw arm. Throw arms come in various styles, but their mechanics never change. To set the snare, a trapper folds over the throw arm, which compresses a spring. A latch called the dog holds the arm down, which sets the trigger. Finally, the trapper connects the snare to the throw arm. When the unsuspecting bear steps on the trigger, the arm will fly back, tightening the snare around the bear's leg. The crew camouflages the trap with twigs and leaves.
A lot of times, too, what we'll try to do is we'll just give them a fake paw print out here in the front, because they like to step where other bears will step.
And what snack is tasty enough to lure a bear into their trap? Day-old donuts and a couple of greasy bacon strips.
This is our secret weapon. We'll go over to a tree and let it pour it down the tree, and then the bear, you can see where he bites and claws at it.
This snare, along with 9 other traps, comprise a trap line spanning several miles, which the team will work for 10 days. But for now, it's time to retreat and wait. Six of the snares are empty.
We're standing right now at trap site number 1, where over the last 2 summers we've caught 6 here. But they don't come back every day.
There's no sign of bear here either.
So we're just going to reset this and give it one more night like this.
But at trap site number 10,
10-4, we got one.
Be there in a minute.
a 250-pound adult male awaits them. The team must tranquilize him before they can begin collecting data.
I don't think he liked that very well.
After about 10 minutes, he's sleeping peacefully. And the team confirms his leg hasn't been injured in the snare. Then they take his measurements and attach his ear tags, which will identify him within the study.
You can see this is the trap that we set yesterday. We've got this nice male in here that we've just worked up, and everything worked out perfectly. You can see he's rotated all around the tree. We said yesterday that we'd come back and there'd probably be some claw marks or bite marks on this tree, and sure shooting, there's a couple marks on this tree. And you can see there's one final donut right outside of his circle that he couldn't reach.
Every individual bear's data are valuable to the study. But that doesn't mean they appreciate being outwitted, especially this mother.
Okay.
She was captured with her cubs in tow. Now they cautiously look on from up in the nearby trees. The management team will base its hunting season recommendations on the data collected from female captures.
She's okay now. Just let her be quiet now. Stand still and let her be quiet. We actually caught this bear last year at the same site. We put a collar on her then, and we followed her all fall and in the winter into the den. So she denned approximately 2 or 3 miles from here and had 2 cubs in March, and they'll stay with them for 1.5 years.
West Virginia law prohibits hunting a mother accompanied by cubs. But once they're on their own, she's fair game.
We've got a tremendous bear population in these counties, and we can still allow people to hunt and to stabilize that population by setting those seasons to actually harvest some of the females, because those females are what control the population.
Within an hour after her release, this mother bear rejoined her cubs. Over the 10-day study period, the team captured, tagged, and released over 20 black bears. But historically, trapping has been geared more towards securing an animal's fur and meat than guaranteeing its species a future. Thousands of years before the rifle, man hunted with traps. Many anthropologists believe one of the first traps was the pitfall. Primitive man used it to catch mammoth nearly 200,000 years ago. By simply digging a hole in the ground and covering it with sticks, dirt, and leaves, they could catch a feast. As society advanced, innovators created increasingly sophisticated traps to capture more elusive prey. Egyptian fowlers in the Nile Valley used clap nets to capture entire flocks of birds. They used 2 12-foot-long, 5-foot-wide hexagonal nets, stretched over wooden frames, resting on an axis. A length of rope was connected to the sides of the trap with catgut strings. When birds landed on the net to feed, the fowlers yanked the rope, which caused the 2 sides of the trap to clap together and captured the birds alive. The fowlers would trap huge flocks for food, decoration, religious sacrifice, and even as a means of pest control in their orchards. Today, the North American Trap Collectors Association Museum in Galloway, Ohio, preserves over 3,000 cunning and often deadly antique traps.
This snare is made of woven plant fibers, comes from the Philippines, and is designed to catch chickens.
Created in the 1800s and still in use today, this non-lethal trap catches birds around their necks.
This is a live muskrat trap, and to set this, you would just raise the lid. The muskrat would float up to the board. You'd have bait in here. They would hit the trigger, and down it would go. They couldn't get out.
The buoyant design keeps the muskrat from drowning.
This is an early Eskimo lemming snare, and the actual snare device is made of whale baleen.
Trap makers have long been developing unique designs for all types of animals, including one species in 17th century America that played a key role in pushing the nation west. The beaver.
The beaver was the most sought-after animal in the continent, and the mountain man was gone after these guys full force. The quality of the pelt was such that once they got these tanned, they would pluck the outer hair and utilize the under fur and would make these top hats. And these were made for the well-to-do people in England and also in the eastern United States, New York, and so on.
Rival fur trading companies fed the fever for beaver. And by the early 1800s, their armies of mountain men were harvesting the 60-pound rodents with steel jaw traps. When the trapper compressed the springs, the jaws opened and were held with a latch called the dog. When a beaver stepped onto the pan, the dog was disengaged and the jaws snapped shut. A chain staked to the ground held the trap and the trapped animal in place. It was a powerful new tool in the hands of the mountain men. So powerful that by 1840, trappers had decimated the beaver population in North America. But their persistence and pioneering spirit opened the West to a flood of migrants, eager to stake their claims on the American frontier. In the 1860s, trap maker Oneida Victor introduced a larger version of the steel jaw trap designed to capture grizzly bears.
This is a number 6 Newhouse bear trap. The jaw spread on this trap is 16.5 inches. The trap is 44 inches long and it weighs 50 pounds.
The number 6 became rightfully known as the Great Bear Tamer. It was strong enough to hold a grizzly up to 1,500 pounds and standing over 7 feet tall on its hind legs. Although it's been outlawed in the United States for over 100 years, poachers reportedly still use them for African lions and polar bears. Even though they're built only for show, Oneida Victor plant manager Rich Butera tests every number 6 to make sure it works properly. And it never gets any easier. It takes 3 minutes for Rich to compress the trap springs. He uses a broom handle to get the leverage needed to crank them down.
Most nerve-wracking part is making sure you keep your hand out of the inside, that you don't actually slip, because it'll only take one slip.
Especially since the jaw set, like many traps of its era, has teeth. Once the trap's set, springing it is literally a snap.
It's just a restraining device to help hold the animal. It's not looking to really damage and maim anything as much as to restrain it.
Animals caught in foothold traps or snares may struggle and writhe for hours before trappers kill or release them. To ensure an immediate kill and eliminate such suffering, designers introduced body gripping traps in the 1950s. When an animal passes through the trap's jaws and brushes the trigger, the jaws rotate in opposite directions at a fraction of a second. If properly executed, the blow will snap the animal's neck, killing it instantly. The dangerous nature of traps like these and many others has compelled the U.S. government to impose strict regulations. And wildlife officials are working to ensure they're used responsibly.
Right now, the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies has put together best management practices based on humane animal welfare aspects of how the animals react to traps, damage to the skin, damage to the animal itself, and several other factors.
While snares, jaw, and body gripping traps remain the status quo for fur trappers, the rest of the world is hunting for a better trap. One powerful enough to battle an army of nocturnal, disease-carrying beasts. It paid to trap beaver in the 1800s. One pelt was worth about $3, almost $100 today. It could have been traded for many goods, including one pair of shoes, 2 pair of scissors, 2 small axes, or 20 fish hooks. Traps will return on Modern Marvels. We now return to traps. On Modern Marvels. Although it's been made of wood, steel, and clay, had many different faces, and dealt many different fates, its directive is always the same: trap mice. At Kness Manufacturing in Albia, Iowa, they're putting a few new twists on this age-old technology. This model, which catches mice alive, is called the catch-all trap.
When you take a trap and you wind it up, what you're doing is putting torque on that spring.
The catch-all epitomizes how catching mice doesn't always hinge on using the right bait. It uses no bait at all, relying instead on expert placement. To protect itself, a mouse instinctively moves along walls, looking for nooks to hide in. When it enters the catch-all, it steps onto the trigger. The trigger activates the spring-loaded 3-sided paddle to rotate around the crossbar. The paddle scoops up the mouse and flips it into the holding compartment. And then the trap's ready to catch another mouse.
And another mouse, another mouse, another mouse, and another mouse, up to 15 to 20 mice, depending upon how it's wound up.
The mice will survive inside the trap for up to 48 hours, and the trapper can dispose of them however he wants. After that, they'll either starve, or due to their lack of mobility, die of hypothermia. Another non-baited Kness mouse trap, the ProCatch, uses a double-entry teeter-totter trigger to let the mice in and keep them in. When a mouse enters the ProCatch, it scurries onto a platform, hinged at the center. As the mouse passes the pivot point, its weight causes the platform to tilt on its hinge, which reveals an opening into the trap's holding compartment. When the mouse steps off the platform falls back into its set position, and the exit is blocked.
It is a live, humane trap, but you have to service the trap. If you want to keep him alive, you put a little water or a little apple, give him something for nourishment.
And for the purist, Kness has its own variation of the conventional snap trap, the Snappy. Its dual spring-driven striker bar creates extra torque. That's bad news for the mouse, but a big help for the trapper.
The reason that the people like this trap is because it's easy to set. Just like that, and it's set. The strike bar is only halfway, and it has just halfway to go. We put this little protector on here to protect the children and pets so that they don't get injured, but it will still kill the mouse.
To cut costs, the company sends the plastic Snappy trap pieces out of house for assembly. Not overseas, but just a half-mile down the road, to Ragtime Industries. Ragtime Industries provides work opportunities to physically and mentally challenged adults that aren't presently capable of competing for local jobs.
It not only helps keep our costs down in manufacturing and assembly, but it also gives them a paycheck. And without them, we wouldn't be able to sell as many snap traps as we do.
The Snappy is just another variation of the original snap trap. The anatomy of a typical snap trap includes a pine board for the base, a metal kill bar or striker, driven by a 15-gauge coil spring, a thin metal trigger rod, and a bait pedal. When the kill bar is pulled back, tension is applied to the spring. The trigger rod holds the kill bar in place until a mouse steps on the bait pedal and releases the latch. The trap size is based on an average length mouse. The 2-inch long striker bar is designed to clear the bait pedal and land its blow behind the mouse's head as it feeds. Ralph Waldo Emerson once mused, "Build a better mousetrap, and the world will beat a path to your door." He was speaking about capitalism. But countless individuals have taken his words literally, in hopes that the world would bring them a big piece of the $1.3 billion a year pest control pie. In 1894, inventor William Hooker was the first to cash in, creating what became the first patented snap trap. Its iconic design remains the industry standard. What might be history's first humane mousetrap was used as early as the 3rd century BC in parts of Asia.
This is an early pottery mouse trap. And when the mouse goes in through the door, goes back and eats through the thread while he's devouring the bait, then the door will then drop down. And there are air holes punched through the pottery to keep the mouse alive.
Another popular variety is less subtle. Crushing traps are based on an even more ancient trap design, the deadfall. Historically, deadfalls have been used to kill animals of all sizes.
This is a deadfall trap. It has 3 blocks of wood, which are held up by a burlap string, and when the mouse or the rat chew through the burlap string, the block of wood will come down and crush them.
Back at the North American Trap Collectors Museum, President Tom Parr demonstrates how a more complicated mousetrap isn't always better.
This is one man's idea of a mousetrap, a rather sophisticated way to let him know that he's got a mouse by lighting a candle. It consists of a mousetrap, and then we have a ramp with a ball bearing, and as the ball bearing rolls down the ramp, there's a rubber band that actuates the block that kicks off the device that holds the match. The match strikes off of the piece of sandpaper and lights the candle. So with that, let's give it a try and see what happens. So the mouse gets caught, the ball bearing goes down, and the match didn't light. Well, doggone that ball. Hello, anybody in there? Well, almost. Came very close, but that's why there's only one of these, is because it didn't work.
Thankfully, some trap makers got it dead right, enabling America's pest control specialists to deploy traps with killer accuracy against the 300 million rats scurrying around the United States.
That rodent, if it has no escape out, will literally throw up its hind back legs, make itself fan out almost like a cat would. It'll start hissing, and all of a sudden that little rat that's probably this big looks like it's this big now. Then they literally can start running at you and attack you. It's kind of like us against them, and it does scare you.
Isotech Pest Management is applying its lethal strategy for dealing with rodents at this Los Angeles area cinema. They begin by cleaning up and eliminating the food source, then blocking off the area inhabited by the creepy critters. One of the traps used by Isotech technicians is a heavy-duty variation of the conventional snap trap.
The old-fashioned snap traps, they're very effective, but there's a lot of danger involved with it too. Excess vibration in different areas will set them off. Over a period of time, they go bad. If the rodent comes traveling down this pipe, it's going to find the food inside of the trap here. He's definitely going to be interested in feeding off of that. And as soon as he gets on there, he's not going anywhere.
This is your standard rat glue board. Now you can use these for mice, but just in case there was rats here, we would set these with the tunnels. That way, if the customers come in, they wouldn't be able to see the rodent, the big rat, because it's covered.
This is a multiple feeder. These holes are designed for the rodents to travel through. As they come in, they'll come in and feed off of the rodenticides. You can get multiple feedings off of this. It has enough bait in it. One of the things is that when it is closed and sealed, it is tamper-proof.
Whether it stabs, electrocutes, or drowns, the mousetrap will carry on as the #1 weapon against rodents.
It says a lot about the human mind. Our forefathers were ingenious in how they made these traps. That's what makes this also interesting. We'll always be looking for the better mousetrap.
As mousetraps continue to save us from pesky rodents, another kind of trap is saving the devastated streets of New Orleans from being taken over by an unlikely pest. In 2006, workers at China's Three Gorges Dam laid 30,000 traps and 43 tons of rat poison to clear rodents from the empty reservoir before filling began. Traps will return on Modern Marvels, here on the History Channel. We now return to traps on Modern Marvels. When Hurricane Katrina ripped through New Orleans in 2005, the storm left approximately 80,000 people homeless. Although 90% of the city's residents were able to evacuate successfully, many were forced to leave behind their pets.
New Orleans, like many other cities across the country, had a stray and feral cat population to begin with. But when Hurricane Katrina came through, the adverse effect on the cat population was that because of the mass evacuation and failure to return of the residents of New Orleans, it left the cats without a food source.
Working under the direction of the Louisiana SPCA, the Humane Society of the United States, various animal welfare agencies, and a network of local volunteers have been fighting to reduce that population. And they're armed with traps.
The trapping is an effort to get back into trying to control the population. And by doing a trap, neuter, release, and manage program, we're hoping that we'll not only cut down on the population and also cut down on the new births, but also provide the cats that are here with a new lease on life, if you will.
The so-called TNRM team sets their traps amidst overgrown landscaping and piles of debris that were once quaint New Orleans neighborhoods and are now refuge for feral cats.
Building 24, 19, 11, and 17, right?
Yeah, and we've got 12 traps to set for all of those buildings.
The program targets the feral or wild cats.
A feral cat is not like your typical house cat that you can pet, handle. Feral cats can be very dangerous. When we're involved in this program, we don't handle these animals at all. They want to be left alone, and we really don't want to be in a situation of having to try to handle them. It hasn't been around people probably ever. It's an animal that's pretty much survived in the wild on its own.
The unpredictable and often violent nature of these cats is offset by the trap used to catch them, the single-entry cage trap.
This is the end of the trap where the animal would enter. So this is the doorway. This little bar here, if you watch the chain there, it puts tension on the chain, and the chain is connected. This is the trip plate here of the trap. So to set it, it's just a pressure situation where the door of the trap rests on this arm. When the animal walks in to get the food, when they step on this plate, it just closes behind them. These little rings drop down, so if they come and start pushing or whatever, they can't get it back up. It's also got a door on this end that opens, which makes it very easy for us to put the bait in.
Kim Staten and Randy Covey set the traps in places where the cats are most likely to travel or congregate, such as under stairs, behind bushes, or near dumpsters. They place a small tray of food in the back of each trap and drip a trail of bait out the front.
I don't want to put too much out around, and then they get sidetracked off here and there and don't actually go into the trap itself.
Good thing about covering them is it cats like enclosed, kind of dark, small places, so these traps are perfect for them. Plus, with feral cats, they have a tendency to get a little freaked out in the cage, and having them covered helps a lot to calm them down.
The team travels all over the ravaged city, methodically setting their traps. Once they're finished,
Empties.
This one's got somebody.
they go back to the first trap site to retrieve the cats they've captured.
Hey, mama girl, you might be pregnant again.
Well, see if we can put a stop to that.
Yeah, no kidding.
The cats are too wild to be good pets, so they're not taken to a shelter for adoption. Instead, they go to the Southern Animal Foundation Veterinary Clinic in New Orleans. The cats are put to sleep, but that's not a euphemism. When they wake up, they'll have been fixed, treated for fleas, and vaccinated.
One of the primary goals is to reduce the population over time. The basic premise behind trap, neuter, release, and manage programs is that by spaying and neutering and vaccinating and giving these stray and feral cats the jump start they need to live healthier lives, they will live out those lives through attrition. You'll reduce overall, and eventually the long-term goal is to eliminate stray and feral cats in these colony areas.
When it's time to prep the cats for surgery, the clinic staff uses cage separators, specially designed to manipulate the cat while inside the cage. Each cat will remain in its trap until it's sedated. When treatments are complete, each feline is returned to its cage and will remain there until it recovers from the anesthesia. After several hours, the trapping team returns them to their capture sites for release. The traps have served their purpose well, but the process of which they're a part addresses a problem with no clear end in sight. Still, volunteers will continue their mission with the help of the single-entry cage trap. While this trap helps quell overpopulation, some traps are enabling an endangered species to thrive, while helping a people preserve their ancient traditions. Rome, Italy is world famous for its trap, neuter, release program. Traps target over 250,000 stray cats, living in about 2,000 colonies. Traps will return on Modern Marvels. We now return to traps on Modern Marvels. Salmon is king catch in America's Pacific Northwest. Every year, over 2 million pounds of its pink flesh are pulled out of the Columbia River. But 10,000 years before modern canneries and fishing boats first materialized, Native American tribes in the region were trapping salmon along the Columbia's banks.
Since the beginning of time, our people have been fishing here. All these scaffolds here are handed down from one generation to the next.
This site, Lyell Falls, is located on the Klickitat River, one of the last undammed tributaries of the Columbia in south-central Washington. For thousands of years, the tribes here have practiced a traditional method of trapping salmon called dip netting.
This pole is about 35 feet long. And I'll push it down until I hit the bottom. And I'll let the net drift along the bottom without trying to hit the bottom. Because the vibration off the hoop will send it to the fish, and the fish will see the hoop. The way we catch these fish with these hoops, nets, is generally by feel. The pole is like an extension of you. You can feel them.
If a fish swims into the dip net, the net collapses around it. The fisherman must then yank up the net before the fish gets loose.
dang it. I didn't feel that one. He got away. Felled him too late.
But James Quiona's Yakima and other tribes may not be dip netting here much longer. Overfishing from 1866 to the 1930s and the introduction of hydroelectric dams in 1932 have pushed the wild-born salmon population below 1 million fish, less than 10% of its numbers 200 years ago. To ensure the salmon remain a sustainable resource, the Yakima, Warm Springs, Nez Perce, and Umatilla tribes formed the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission, or CRITFIC, in 1977. CRITFIC researchers use various traps to study the salmon population. And one of them is integrated into the fish ladder, or fish pass, at Bonneville Dam. The trap monitors adult salmon swimming back upstream from the ocean as they make their way to their natal streams.
We sample the sockeye as well as chinook and steelhead to get length measurements, to collect scales from which we can determine the age of the fish. And we also put small tags in the fish that we then can track the fish as they go upstream.
When they hit the dam, the fish are diverted into the mouth of the ladder. Salmon instinctively swim against the current, so the trap simulates that condition. The fish swim past gates in the ladder until they reach a holding tank. When workers shut the tank's gates, they activate water jets to simulate the current. The fish swim up over the jets and onto a water slide. A technician diverts the salmon to the research tank, but lets the other fish pass through the system, sending them back on their way up the river. The water in the holding tank contains an anesthetic. This makes the fish easier to handle.
Okay, this is a steelhead, and it's a male. And what I'm doing now is I'm taking scales for age composition. Now we're going to take a hole punch in the caudal fin to determine genetic sample stock composition.
By injecting a pit tag, or passive integrated transponder, into the salmon's belly, biologists can track this fish over the course of its life. Catching juvenile salmon, or smolts, measuring just inches long, requires a different trap. Smolts migrate downstream to the ocean to mature. During their journey, many congregate in floating rotary screw traps. In order to keep the screw trap from drifting away, researchers tether it to the riverbank.
The screw trap operates by the river flowing downstream and hitting these propellers. And they're essentially like spiral staircases. And that auger type mechanism brings the juvenile fish downstream into our live box.
Plant matter and other debris are separated out of the live box with a screen. To study the salmon, researchers fish them out of the trap and move them to the shore.
So this is what we've collected in our rotary screw trap. We take lengths and weights on these fish and identify them, whether they're of hatchery or wild origin, and the various species.
When the juvenile fish are released back to the river, the researchers and the tribes are hopeful that they'll return next year.
The tribes don't want salmon just to look at and say how nice they are. It's been an important part of their economy, their culture, their diet for thousands of years, and they want to see that continue.
These traps work because the fish swim right in without a second thought. The same strategy, coupled with 600-pound doors and choking gas, will also trap the most intelligent animal of all. In 1883, fishermen trapped 43 million pounds of salmon on the Columbia. That's over 20 times the salmon trapped in the river today. Traps will return on Modern Marvels. We now return to traps on Modern Marvels. From the outside, this $10 million mansion overlooking Los Angeles' famed Sunset Strip seems like a fantasy home. But inside, it's every intruder's worst nightmare. Bulletproof walls and windows, hidden cameras and biosensors are just the beginning. This house is loaded with traps so smart, it'll have even the best burglar caught in his tracks. This is the showplace for a security company called Strategically Armored and Fortified Environments, or SAFE. And lurking somewhere, at the very core of its multiple layers of security, is the devilish technology waiting to capture and confine any intruder that treads here: the man trap. Its sophisticated design is a far cry from its historical counterparts. One of the most heinous applications of the man trap was on Jamaican plantations during the 18th century. They were modified steel jaw traps used to deter slaves from escaping. Although they could break bones and cause massive blood loss, their purpose was to keep the victims alive until the plantation owners could decide their fate. The modern man trap inside this Los Angeles mansion isn't so gruesome, but security system designer Al Corby has made it maniacally ingenious. It lies at the heart of what he's dubbed the Safe Core.
Within the Safe Core, we have the nursery, one of the guest rooms, and the entire master bedroom complex. So when you go to bed at night, you're already safe.
The Safe Core is designed to protect loved ones inside and keep the intruder locked outside.
All these walls, ceilings, and floors are all ballistic grade. To enter, you come in through 3 doors. The doors are twin chromium steel plates. They've got 12 chromium steel columns and beams and bolts in them. By turning this one simple throw, you send out 12 bolts all the way around the door, locking it into a chromium steel frame. You can't shoot through it with any handguns or rifles, and it'll take most blasts.
The only way to enter and exit the core is with keys or biometric sensors.
This is the best key of all. It's always with you. It can't be duplicated. They can't cut your finger off and use it. It's only live tissue. And you can't use cellophane or any of the goofy things you see in the movies. You got your finger, you place it in here. We're in.
All of these layers of protection lead up to this seemingly innocuous room, the inescapable man trap.
Assuming somebody's made it this far, they're actually in the master closet. They're where a lot of the valuables are. However, they're also in a man trap. They've been locked down. They're isolated from the wife, the children, the entire family. And actually, the intruder becomes the victim at this point.
If the intruder enters this space, he's locked in. His movement triggers proximity or motion sensors, which send a message to the homeowner via cell phone.
The owners know he's here. They can communicate with him, tell him to sit down and be comfortable until the police arrive.
You're obviously someplace you shouldn't be. Sit down on the floor and don't touch anything, and you won't be harmed.
If he doesn't, there are tactical systems in here that can make him want to cooperate. This is probably the best device on the market for that. Fog Shield, it's a device that puts a gas into the man trap. It can be all the way from benign, which will make him very nervous, all the way to lethal, depending upon what cartridge you put into it.
All the homeowner needs to do to engage the system is press a button on their phone.
He's been told, don't do anything. If he doesn't listen, if he starts taking jewelry, throwing gas on the walls, it's time to end it.
The criminal who made his way into this gas chamber will beg the cops to grant him the asylum of a jail cell. Corby designs his custom systems to be invisible.
There's no bars on the windows. There's no cameras that you can see. They only see you. There's no audible devices that you can see. They only hear and talk to you.
Gotcha. You've taken the bait and watched another episode of Modern Marvels.
Did I see smoke? I saw smoke.
You might have.
Smoke.
But in the case of this trap, you get to walk away.
I got it. I got it.
When you least expect it, these mechanical beasts bite down and never let go. A death sentence for rodents.
He's not going anywhere.
A beacon of hope for fish. A tool for cleaning up New Orleans. Or a human intruder's worst nightmare.
Don't touch anything and you won't be harmed.
Simple in concept, yet advanced in their engineering. They pushed the American frontier to the west and created a division in its people. You'd better watch your step. Now, Traps on Modern Marvels. We now return to Traps on Modern Marvels. Randolph County, West Virginia. It's part of the 920,000 acres of Monongahela National Forest. It's home to nearly 4,000 American black bears.
I don't think he liked that very well.
After about 10 minutes, he's sleeping peacefully. And the team confirms his leg hasn't been injured in the snare. Then they take his measurements and attach his ear tags, which will identify him within the study.
You can see this is the trap that we set yesterday. We've got this nice male in here that we've just worked up, and everything worked out perfectly. You can see he's rotated all around the tree. We said yesterday that we'd come back and there'd probably be some claw marks or bite marks on this tree, and sure shooting, there's a couple marks on this tree. And you can see there's one final donut right outside of his circle that he couldn't reach.
Every individual bear's data are valuable to the study. But that doesn't mean they appreciate being outwitted, especially this mother.
Okay.
She was captured with her cubs in tow. Now they cautiously look on from up in the nearby trees. The management team will base its hunting season recommendations on the data collected from female captures.
We'll go over to a tree and let it pour it down the tree. And in the bear, you can see where he bites and claws at it.
This snare, along with 9 other traps, comprise a trap line spanning several miles, which the team will work for 10 days. But for now, it's time to retreat and wait. Six of the snares are empty.
We're standing right now at trap site number 1, where over the last 2 summers we've caught 6 here. But they don't come back every day.
There's no sign of bear here either.
So we're just going to reset this and give it one more night like this.
But at trap site number 10,
10-4, we got one.
Be there in a minute.
a 250-pound adult male awaits them. The team must tranquilize him before they can begin collecting data.
See, when the bear would be caught, the cables point out, so it's not cutting into the paw.
The flat, even ground at the tree's base is perfect for securing the trap's key mechanical component, the throw arm. Throw arms come in various styles, but their mechanics never change. To set the snare, a trapper folds over the throw arm, which compresses a spring. A latch called the dog holds the arm down, which sets the trigger. Finally, the trapper connects the snare to the throw arm. When the unsuspecting bear steps on the trigger, the arm will fly back, tightening the snare around the bear's leg. The crew camouflages the trap with twigs and leaves.
A lot of times too, what we'll try to do is we'll just give them a fake paw print out here in the front, because they like to step where other bears have stepped.
And what snack is tasty enough to lure a bear into their trap? Day-old donuts and a couple of greasy bacon strips.
This is our secret weapon.
And every year, experts from the West Virginia Division of Natural Resources Black Bear Management Program
Shake it up so.
are out to trap them as part of an ongoing statewide population study. The beastly challenge of trapping an animal that can weigh up to 400 pounds is handled with snares, a type of modified lasso. They must be powerful enough to capture and restrain the bears, yet incorporate a humane design that won't injure them. The first step in building the snare is to pick a tree.
When we're looking for the snare spot, we're looking for just that perfect tree. Not one that's too big that we can't get the cable around, not one too small that he's going to break it off the next morning. We're looking for a nice medium-sized tree, like this maple right here.
Chris Ryan will use the tree as an anchor for the snare. He chains a wire loop to the trunk.
This is a spring we put on the snares just for safety, just like on a porch swing, so that it's not just hooked to the tree real solid, so that the actual snare will give. And then you come out to the end of it. This is just what we call the angle iron. And what we'll do is we'll point the actual cable on the outside. You can see